All right, thanks everybody for joining another free training Friday. Just by show of hands, if you can click your little hand raising button there, just let me know that you can hear me okay. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate that. Looks like the audio is doing good. And I also shared my screen out, so you should be able to see that now. If you could just raise your hand just to make sure that you can see that. All right, great. Thank you all so much. All right, today we're going to be talking about queries, okay? Feel free to ask any questions that you have in the little chat pane. For those who haven't joined us before, you'll probably notice that you're muted. That's by design. So any questions you have, just use that chat pane, and we will try and answer as many questions as we can at the end of our webinar. And anything that we can't get to, any questions we can't answer, we're going to go ahead and follow up with you via email. So don't be alarmed if we don't get to the question. We will follow up with you. So like I said, we're going to be talking about queries. And, you know, I get asked this question a lot when I'm doing trainings. What are queries exactly? For those people who haven't ever used a database program or a case management program in the past, it can be kind of foreign to them. So queries are basically search filters. It's a way to just filter out the data that you see in a report. It's also a great way to filter the data that you visually see within your databases, right? So if I'm, let's say I'm an attorney at a law firm that has 10 other attorneys, and maybe I only handle the divorce cases, and maybe another attorney handles all of the adoption cases. It's quite possible that whenever I access my matters database, I only want to see cases that are assigned to me, right? We see that with larger firms. And then also, you know, if we're creating some sort of a report, okay, inside of our report window, maybe we're doing some sort of matters report where we want to see only active cases within a certain date range, right? We can create those queries. So that's what I mean by queries. They're kind of like search filters. Now, we're going to focus specifically on queries from our databases, our names and our events data, or our matters databases. But just so you know, it's the exact same steps, the exact same logic if you were creating queries within your names, events, or matters reports windows, okay? The steps are going to be exactly the same once you get into that whole query building phase, okay? But just for sake of time, we're going to focus really within our actual database for our cases here. So when you open up your matters database, like I have open here, you'll notice in the top right corner, there's a button that says query, and there's a little field next to it that may or may not have some text in it. Now mine has text in it. It has the word open, okay? That's because I have a query set by default called open, and what that does is it only shows me open cases. So if I have a bunch of cases in my matters database that are closed, I don't have to worry about scrolling through those cases here or searching within the closed cases as well, because my system right now is only showing me open cases, okay? So if I want to change that, or if I want to set maybe a new query, I have my little query button here. And in this query button, I've got two options that we're going to focus on today. The first one is our quick query. The second one is the query manager. So the quick query is a way to set a quick filter. That's why we call it a quick query. And when I select quick query, what it does is it opens up a blank matters window for me where I can set some criteria. For instance, if I only want to see cases that are assigned to a specific attorney, then what I can do is click my query button, choose quick query, and set in my attorney field that specific attorney's code, okay? So I would choose that person's code, and notice how it now puts that person's initials in that field. And when I click done down here, that is going to create a temporary query. Now, if you happen to have multiple queries going at the same time, you'll get this little warning here that's basically just giving you some information about combining queries. It's asking you if you want to combine your queries or if you just want to use the new one. So for this case, I'm just going to use my new query where I'm just targeting a specific attorney. Okay, and notice how the volume of my cases changed now. Okay, because right now all I'm seeing are cases that have SH assigned as the attorney. Okay, so that's my way of filtering the view that I'm seeing. Also notice up here in my little box, see how that's switched to say SH temp? That's because we just set a temporary query. So if I want to clear that query out and see all of my cases in my database, I can click that little query button again, and we have the option right at the top of our list to clear the current query. Okay, that clears it out. Now we have no query set, and we're viewing every case in our system. Okay, so the quick query option, again, that's the second option in the list, is going to open up that window for you where you can set different criteria, right? Maybe I want to see only specific attorneys and only cases within a specific phase. Okay, I can do that. All I have to do is set those two fields. So any field that you have on this screen, you can make a quick query off of. So that's quick queries, just short, temporary queries, just to quickly show us the proper cases. And the same applies for our names, okay? If you're inside of that name window, your names database, you can do the exact same thing here, okay? You still have a query button. You can click that. You can click quick query here, and you get a name record where you can go in and you can maybe set something like zip code if you want to see contacts that are from a specific zip code. Okay, we can punch that in, click done, and I don't have any matching records here in this one, but if I did, they would pull up. Okay, so it's the same logic no matter whether you're accessing from the names database, the matters database, or even the events database. So I'm going to go back into my matters database, and we are going to talk about the actual query manager. So we talked about the quick query, which, like I said, is temporary. The query manager is where you can create static queries that you're going to be using over and over again. Okay, so and usually you're building queries in the query manager that are a little bit more elaborate, right? So maybe you want to create a query that says, show me all of Johnny's cases that are divorce cases that started in January. Okay, those are three pretty specific criteria. So we would want to probably create a static query using the query manager here. So if you go into the query manager, this is going to open up a list of all of your current queries that you already have created. Now my list is probably going to be much more elaborate than yours, just because as a trainer I train on quite a few different versions of the program. But you'll have a pretty decent list in here. One of the queries you'll definitely have by default is called open. Okay, this is a query that comes with your program. So if you just want to see open cases, in other words, you don't care about all those closed cases in the database, you can just set that, click done, and then it's going to ask you which record in the set you want to go to. You can say first, last, next, whatever. Usually people say first. Okay, and that's going to show you all open cases. So what I invite you to do, if you've never been inside of the query manager before, get to know the queries that came with your program. Okay, take a look at them, understand the logic, and the idea behind, what they actually do. A good way to view and to see behind the scenes of the queries that come with your program is to just highlight it and click edit. Okay, this is going to open up the query builder, and this is going to show you the fields that the system uses and the comparison that the system uses. Okay, and we're going to dive deeper into that right now, because eventually what's going to happen is you're going to want to modify these queries, or even more, you're probably going to want to create your own. So when you create your own and you're in this query manager, you have an add button, top right corner. If you click that add button, it's going to open up a blank query builder window. And in this window, we want to obviously give our query an ID. Okay, give it a description. Okay. Another thing too, you want to make sure that you're doing here, and I tell people this for any time you're creating something in the system, and other people could potentially be using it, be thorough in your descriptions, okay? Be thorough, because you're not the only person who's going to be using these queries, so it's nice to have a nice description in there that if a new hire comes in or a new attorney or somebody like that, they can look at the description and they can, decide or be able to tell exactly what it is, okay? But once we give the query an ID, the query a description, now we need to go down here to our actual expression. And if we think about this logically, what we're doing is we're basically just telling the program what fields in our system we want to create our queries off of. So if we either double click on this line here or click add, it's going to open up our expression editor. Okay, and again, this is where we tell the system, first off, what field do we want to query off of? So I would choose from my list of available matters fields. Okay, when I click that little arrow, it's going to open up all of my fields for my matters. So you'll need to go through this list and you'll have to choose the field that you want to start your query on. Okay, so I may choose something like attorney or something like that. And then I need to set my comparison. So the comparison is your way of telling the program, how do you want the system to judge this field? Okay, so my comparison is pretty straightforward. I'm going to say things like, is exactly equal to, is greater than, is less than, is empty, words that start with, different things like that, okay? Or maybe not equal to, not empty. So if I'm looking for cases that are assigned to a specific attorney, I want to first put in my attorney field, and my comparison would be, is exactly equal to. And then I put in the value. The value is what we want to see in that attorney field for this to be true. So I happen to know that my attorney's initials are SH, so I would put SH in the value field. So with this expression right here, what the system is going to do when we run this query is it's going to go to every single matter record and it's going to look at the attorney field. And if it is exactly equal to SH, then that matter is going to show. Okay, so now we click done. That's one line. Now you're going to be building out queries that have multiple expressions, right? Multiple comparisons and things like that. So you can add additional lines to each one of these queries. Just click your add button. And when you click the add button, it's going to ask you, how do you want to combine the previous condition with the next? In other words, is it an and or is it an or? So if I'm looking for all of the personal injury cases assigned to attorney SH, both of those things have to be true. It has to be assigned to SH and it has to be a personal injury case. So for that scenario, I would click and, right? And then when I click and, it opens up my expression editor again, where I have to, then put in the rest of the expression. So what field am I looking at? I'm looking at case code, which is also the type of case. And then I do my comparison. Now for this one, if I want it to be PI injury, then I would do is exactly equal to, and then I just put in the value, PI-INJ. When I click done, now I have both levels to my query. First thing that has to be true is the attorney has to be SH. The second thing that has to be true is the case code has to be equal to PI injury. So you can keep building these out, ands, ors, ands, ors. Just remember, your ands, whenever you have an and, Both things have to be true, okay? Whenever you have an or, it's one or the other. So usually, you're going to have your ors at the end, okay? You'll usually have your ors at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and click Done, and there's our query, okay? If you want to get a feel for how many records meet the criteria of this query, you can actually highlight the query here, and then click the little button that says Count in the bottom left, and it will give you a count of each one of those, okay? So I don't have any that happen to meet both that criteria. That's all that means, okay? But if we go up here to open, see how there's a count of 36? So that just means that there are 36 cases in my system that are currently open. So whenever you hit count, that's actually a great way to identify whether or not your query was built accurately without even running it. If you happen to know that you've got 150 PI injury cases or somewhere around there, in your system, and you run a count and it comes up 0, well, you know that there's something wrong in your query. So you'll need to go back to that query editor and maybe make some changes, okay? But all we have to do now that we have the query built is select it, click Done, and now that's the query that's in play, okay? If this is a query that we always want to stand, we want it to be the default query, which is very popular for the open query. There is an option right here in your little drop-down menu to set the current query as default. So that way, every time you open up your Matters Browse window, that query is always set unless you change it. So very popular for the open query, and that's very popular for queries that you build for specific attorneys, okay? And that's basically, that's basically queries in a nutshell. Quick query is going to be one you'll use quite often, just as a recap. Okay, that's where you can just, kind of enter in your filters using the fields here. Okay, and the query manager is what you're going to use for your static queries that you're probably going to be using over and over throughout time. Okay, so create those here and you'll be able to apply them whenever you need to. All right, so we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. Kaylee's going to go ahead and read your questions from the chat pane. And Kaylee, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi all. Thanks for being here. So far, I don't see any questions from you guys. If you have any, please feel free to speak up now. We have some time.
I guess my explanation was just so good that nobody has any questions.
That's right.
The thing about queries, too, while people are thinking about potential questions and typing, queries, rules, different things like that, you really have to do them over and over to become proficient, okay? So just keep that in mind. Get in there and build out some queries, build out some rules, and I think you'll find yourself getting very good at them.
Okay, so Lauren asks, how would you create a to-do list?
Well, that would be more from like a report type, function. So you can actually just print a to-do list directly from your calendar if you need to. Okay, there is a print button there, and when you click print calendars, there is a to-do list right here that you can kind of set up by date. Okay, there is a setup option in here as well. Kaylee, go ahead and just mute your microphone there. I'm just getting a little feedback. There is a setup option there as well, just to show you that again. Select to-do list, go to setup, and in here you can set different types of who filters, what filters, time filters, and things like that. So that's one way if you're just trying to print a quick to-do list, how to do it. Now, if you're speaking more from a report standpoint, like you want to actually print out like an elaborate report, you can go into your report menu for events, and in here, under your query manager, you can create all kinds of different to-dos. Okay, we've got actually some that already come with your system, so you'll want to kind of take a look at those. And we have quite a few different event queries as well. So there should already be some that are created for you.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Susan asks, we have many old queries on our system. Would it be all right to delete all and start over, or do I need to know what originally came with Abacus and leave them alone? We have had Abacus for over 20 years.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being so loyal. We definitely appreciate that. So to answer your question, if you delete a query from your queries list, from your query manager, I should say, this isn't really going to break your system. Okay, it's not going to delete any, case data. It's not going to hurt anything like that. If you accidentally delete one, the worst thing that would happen would be, you probably have to rebuild it. So I guess the short answer is no. It's not going to hurt anything if you want to delete, old queries that were originally in your program and you just don't ever use them. Not going to hurt a thing. Go ahead and get rid of those. And you'll see this a lot, with the queries that come in our specialty versions, right? Like maybe I am a family law firm, but I only do divorce. I don't do adoptions. I don't do paternity. I don't do any of that, right? So I may come in here and get rid of, things like paternity, right? All you have to do is just click delete, and that will remove them from the list. If for some reason you delete something, or maybe down the road you say, I really wish we wouldn't have deleted all those queries, we can always reinstall those things for you. You could just contact our tech support and we could get it done for you. But short answer, it's not going to hurt anything if you delete a query.
Nikki asks, how do queries work when using extra databases?
Well, it's going to depend on the database, but really they work almost exactly the same. And if you want to get together, I think it was Nikki, we can dive into that. It's a little bit more elaborate than what I showed you today. So maybe you and I can schedule some time to get together and talk about that. We'll have a little session and go over it. But the logic behind it is really the same way. But Nikki, you and I will get together and we'll go over that.
Kelly wants to know, can you create a query on the accounting side?
So you can't. Queries are really built specifically for AbacusLaw, but I'd be curious to know what you mean by that. Like, what information are you looking to get? If you could just give me an example, feel free to just follow up in the chat. And if I don't have an answer for you after that, I'll follow up with you afterwards and we'll talk about it.
Okay, so switching over to another question. When we use queries under Setup, Reports, Matters, can we include fields from Names window, Database, in parentheses, as well?
So that kind of goes back to the cross-reference question, and which is kind of in line with the extra database question. So that's something that you can do. It depends on the report, though. Okay, if you're inside of your report menu, let me pull that over for you. Okay, and let's say we have a matters list report, and we click Edit right here. There is a sub-report option. And also notice there is a query option built in to each report that you can set. So if you have sub-reports that include linked names with your matters, absolutely, you can set embedded queries for each one of those. And basically, you're just harnessing data from the matters database and you're merging it with the related data from the names database. So yeah, so what I would invite you to do is inside of your matter report control window, don't necessarily look here at the query button, but look more here at the report button, and then highlight the report and edit, and take a look at those sub-report options, and take a look at the query options that you can list as well. Okay, so good. That's a very good question. One thing I do want to point out to everybody, okay, if you're going to be modifying reports, modifying existing queries, and you're not 100% confident in your skills, that's okay. There is a clone option in each one of those windows. So if I'm going to go in here and I'm going to, start messing with the default queries and the subreports for these different matters, it may be a good idea to clone it first, give it a new name, Scott's matters report. So that way, if I mess up or if I don't like it, I still have my original in place. So that clone button can be a lifesaver.
Bob would like to know, can you specify a query like all open adoption cases opened after January 1st?
Yeah, great question, Bob. So what you're going to do there is that all comes down to your comparison, is really what that comes down to, okay? So if we look at any type of query that involves a date, for instance, opened in 2016, okay? Notice our comparisons here. Opened greater than or equal to 1/1/2016. Opened less than or equal to 12/31/2016. So what's that going to do? It's going to show me every case within that date range, right? So if we apply that same logic to all adoption cases opened within a date range or after a certain date, really all we have to do is just mimic this exact query here and just add another line to it that says case code equal to adoption. So I would say, case code equal to adoption and open date greater than or equal to January 1, 2017. Great question. So the comparison is very important when you're building out those expressions.
Thanks for all your questions. Anne wants to know, can I do a query to know what are all the emails for a specific day, week, etc.?
So that's one that we've actually gotten questions on a few times before, and there isn't a way to do that right now. That's just because emails are actually an external source that get linked to a record. So there's no way to do it default out of the system. However, what you could do is customize your fields in your screens and have some sort of identifying marker, some sort of identifying field, whether it's a field or a checkbox or something that says, that emails have been linked to this case, and then you would build your query based off of that. So there might be some workaround ways to do that, but as of right now, just going into this little linked email window, no, there's no way to really create a query report based off that, just because these aren't the emails themselves aren't actually stored inside of Abacus. It's really just a link.
And I think we have time for about one more question. This one comes from Gloria. How do you display the query properties in a report?
Great question. So if you're under File, Reports, and let's say we're just wanting to look at matters, it's the same no matter what you check here. It doesn't matter. When you go in, you'll have your query button here. Okay. So if you want to see so I guess this is a two-part answer. Okay. If you want to see the properties of any of the queries in your query manager, just click Query Manager, highlight the query, and select Edit. Okay. That's going to show you how that's built out. If you want to see the query properties of any query embedded in a report, then you need to click this Reports button, find the report, click Edit, and then there's a query button there. And then anyone that's checked here, that will be the one that is applied to that particular report. Now, I don't think this one has one applied, but you would see it checked right there, and all you would have to do at that point is just highlight it, click Edit, and you could see what that query actually entails.
Well, Scott, I think I'll let you wrap it up here. That's about it for the questions. There might be one or two more, so we will make sure to respond via email.
All right.
Thanks to everybody for coming.
Yep, and just so everybody remembers, use that help menu, okay? You have access to our knowledge base directly from the help menu. Okay, you also have access to the guides as well, okay, under additional help. There's your reference guide. There's a lot of information in there on building more advanced queries, so you may want to take a look at that. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and hope to see you next Friday.